At my son's wedding rehearsal, his fiancée looked me dead in the eye and said, "You're not welcome here. Leave." Hearing those words in front of everyone felt like a punch straight to the gut. Around 60 guests turned their heads to stare at me, the very man who had paid for their fancy evening. And then, out of the crowd, stepped my ex-wife, Diane. She wore that smug little grin she always had when she thought she'd won, standing proudly behind the woman who had been draining my bank account for months. Even my own son had chosen to believe her lies instead of recognizing the years of sacrifice and love I'd poured into him. They thought they were watching some broken father accept exile from his family. But they had no idea who they were dealing with. They didn't see Ethan Marshall, the man who'd built his life from the ground up. While they celebrated what they thought was their victory, I was already plotting a payback Chicago high society would never forget. Their little fairy tale was about to turn into something darker. Before we get into what I uncovered about Emily's 6-month-long scheme, tell me in the comments where you're watching from and whether you think I should have fought back or just walked away quietly. I honestly never imagined that what should have been one of the proudest moments of my life would become the most humiliating. I was standing on the rooftop terrace of one of Chicago's most exclusive restaurants, looking out at the skyline. 60 people were gathered for my son Daniel's rehearsal dinner. The city lights sparkled below like a million tiny stars. Champagne glasses caught the evening glow, and soft laughter floated through the air. Emily, radiant in the designer dress I'd quietly paid for, stood next to Daniel, looking like she was about to give a heartfelt speech. My chest swelled with pride. Even though the divorce had been ugly, for a moment I thought maybe we were finally coming together again as a family. "I want to thank everyone for being here tonight," Emily began, her voice carrying across the terrace. The chatter stopped as people turned to listen. "This has been such a journey for Daniel and me." I smiled and raised my champagne glass, expecting a toast. But then her eyes locked onto mine, and something cold flashed in them. "Before we celebrate," she continued, her voice sharpening, "I think it's important to address something that's been weighing on my heart." The terrace went still. "Daniel and I have talked a lot about toxic relationships," she said. My smile faltered. Something was off. She didn't look away from me. "Now I understand why Diane left you, Ethan. You're controlling and emotionally unavailable. Daniel deserves better than your toxic influence." Her words landed like body blows. "You think throwing money around makes you a father, but real love isn't about writing checks. You've spent 30 years trying to buy affection because you're incapable of earning it. That's why your marriage failed. That's why Daniel came to me for real guidance instead of his pathetic excuse for a father." I could feel the stares, 60 pairs of eyes boring into me. The warm evening suddenly felt stifling, like the air itself had turned heavy. "Emily, please," Daniel started weakly. "No, Daniel. We discussed this," she snapped, stepping forward, her voice even sharper. "Ethan, you're a bitter, lonely man who destroys everything you touch. You're the reason this family fell apart. You're not welcome here. Get out." The rooftop fell dead silent. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it. Then I saw her. Diane. My ex-wife emerged from behind the guests with that triumphant smile I'd always dreaded. She had been there the whole time, waiting for this exact moment. "Emily's absolutely right," Diane said, her voice thick with satisfaction. "Daniel finally has someone who sees through your manipulation, Ethan. Someone who won't enable your controlling, narcissistic behavior like I did for 20 years. The world seemed to tilt under my feet. This wasn't random. This was staged. A calculated, well-rehearsed assassination of my character. I stood frozen as whispers rippled through the crowd. Some guests glanced away, embarrassed. Some of the guests almost seemed entertained by the spectacle, whispering behind their hands as if it were some reality show. My son stared at the floor, silent and motionless, just like always when things got hard. Then Daniel finally spoke, and his words cut deeper than anything Emily had said. "Dad," he murmured, still looking at the ground. "You're not welcome here. Just go." That quiet dismissal from my own son landed like a blade. It was the final blow. A complete public gutting. I set my champagne glass down, my hand barely trembling. 30 years of fatherhood, 5 years of rebuilding after the divorce, months of planning this perfect wedding, all shredded in less than 5 minutes of orchestrated cruelty. Without saying a word, I turned and walked toward the elevator. Behind me, Emily's voice slipped back into its sweet, charming tone, steering everyone's attention back to the celebration as if nothing had happened, as if they hadn't just gutted me in front of everyone who mattered. The elevator doors closed, and as the floors ticked by, something began to smother the shock and humiliation. Rage. Not wild, screaming rage, but cold, surgical, calculating rage. They truly believed they could humiliate me and still enjoy the fairy tale wedding I was bankrolling. They thought I'd quietly disappear while still paying for their happiness. They were about to discover how catastrophically wrong they were. Driving through downtown Chicago felt like drifting through a nightmare. Red lights smeared across my windshield as I gripped the steering wheel so tight my knuckles went white against the leather. Every block was a reminder of something I had built, something that suddenly felt meaningless after what had just happened. 28 years ago, I'd held Daniel in my arms for the first time at St. Mary's Hospital, just 6 blocks from where I was now. I remembered whispering promises to that tiny baby. "I'll give you everything. I'll be the father I never had." And I had kept those promises. Every single one. When Diane left 5 years ago, claiming I was emotionally distant, I poured myself into being both mother and father for Daniel. I showed up for every milestone, quietly covered his rent for nearly a year, and even helped him buy Emily's engagement ring when his savings fell short. But now Emily's words echoed through my mind like poison. Pathetic excuse for a father. "You're not welcome here." And Daniel's voice, his voice, hurt the most. Just go." My own son. The boy I had sacrificed everything for. Everything I had done was for him, and he had just publicly disowned me without a flicker of hesitation. I pulled into the underground garage of my building, the concrete walls closing around me like a tomb. The elevator ride up to the 42nd floor felt endless. When the doors finally opened to my penthouse, the space felt different, emptier somehow. The floor-to-ceiling windows that usually showed off the glittering city now looked more like a cage. I poured myself 3 fingers of 30-year-old scotch and stood by the glass. Somewhere out there, Emily and Diane were probably celebrating their successful ambush. Somewhere out there, my son was being comforted by the very woman who had just destroyed his father. The scotch burned going down, but not nearly as much as the realization that I'd been played. This hadn't been spontaneous. Diane's perfectly timed entrance, the coordinated attack, all of it had been rehearsed. They'd used my love for Daniel as a weapon against me. I walked to my home office and sat behind the heavy walnut desk that had seen 1,000 business deals. The wedding binder sat in the center, thick with contracts, invoices, and receipts. Every vendor, every service, every detail of Daniel and Emily's dream wedding bore my name, my signature, my money. $95,000. That's what I'd spent so far on their fantasy. The venue alone had cost $40,000. The flowers were $110,000. The photographer? $9,000. Catering? $25,000. On top of all that, Emily's dress, the rehearsal dinner, even the honeymoon I'd secretly booked for them in Tuscany, every last detail had my signature and my money behind it. I opened my laptop and pulled up the vendor contact list. 43 different suppliers, all expecting payment, all contracts under my name. They really believed they could humiliate me in front of everyone and still dance at the wedding I was financing. They thought I'd slink off quietly, licking my wounds, while they laughed at my destruction. They had gravely underestimated Ethan Marshall. I reached for my phone, scrolled to the first contact, Lakeshore Pavilion, the venue where, in less than 24 hours, Daniel and Emily planned to exchange vows in front of 200 guests. My finger hovered over the call button for a few seconds. Then I pressed it. Lakeshore Pavilion, this is Jessica speaking. Her voice was cheerful, professional, completely unaware that she was about to become a witness to the slow demolition of a fairy tale. This is Ethan Marshall. I'm the contract holder for the Marshall-Carter wedding this Saturday. I'm calling to cancel the event. Effective immediately. There was a pause. Then, I'm sorry, sir. Did you say, cancel? That's correct. Cancel the venue, terminate all services, release the space. But sir, the wedding is this Saturday. That's less than 5 days away. Are you absolutely certain? I've never been more certain of anything in my life. I hung up and dialed the next number. Enchanted Florals. This is Ethan Marshall regarding the Marshall-Carter wedding this Saturday. I need to cancel all floral arrangements immediately. But Mr. Marshall, we've already imported the specialty blooms from Europe. Cancel the orders. The wedding isn't happening. And so it went. Premier catering. The photographer. The string quartet. The bartending service. One by one, I dismantled the entire production. Each call followed the same rhythm: shock, protest, desperate attempts to salvage the deal, and then, finally, resignation. Mr. Marshall, this is highly irregular. We've already purchased ingredients for 200 guests. Send me the cancellation fees. I'll pay whatever's required. What should we tell the other vendors? They're all expecting this wedding. Tell them to ask Emily Carter. She'll have plenty to explain. By 2 in the morning, I had made 37 phone calls: the cake designer, the transportation company, the videographer, the lighting crew, even the woman who'd been hired to scatter rose petals down the aisle. Each cancellation felt like pulling a piece from a house of cards. Emily and Diane thought they could build their fairy tale on the rubble of my humiliation. They were about to learn that when you rip out the foundation, the whole structure collapses. My phone buzzed with texts as word spread through the vendor network. Some messages were confused, others angry about the 5-day cancellation. A few were surprisingly sympathetic once I explained that I'd just been told I wasn't welcome at my own son's wedding. The final call was to Antonio's Pastries, a family bakery scheduled to create Emily's 5-tier dream cake with gold leaf and hand-sculpted sugar flowers. Antonio's daughter answered. Mr. Marshall, we haven't started the cake yet, but we've already purchased the specialty ingredients. Are you sure you want to cancel? I'm sure. Cancel everything. Bill me for the costs. There was a sigh. That's a shame, sir. We were excited to create something beautiful for your family. Beauty built on lies never lasts long, I said. I leaned back in my leather chair, staring at the storm I'd unleashed. 43 vendors, all scrambling to understand why a wedding that was supposed to be the social event of the season had evaporated less than a week before the ceremony. My computer screen glowed with incoming emails, cancellation confirmations, frantic notes from suppliers, angry messages from vendors furious about lost deposits. But the message I was waiting for hadn't come yet. The one that would matter most. The call from Daniel, once he realized his dream wedding had turned into a smoking crater. As if on cue, my phone lit up. His name flashed across the screen. I let it ring 3 times before I answered. Hello, son. What the hell did you do? Daniel's voice cracked, equal parts rage and panic. The venue called Emily 20 minutes ago. They said you canceled everything. Everything, Dad. I stayed calm. I canceled what I was paying for. Since I'm not welcome at the wedding, I didn't see a reason to keep funding it. This is insane, he shouted. You can't just destroy our wedding because your feelings got hurt. My feelings hurt? My tone was sharper than I intended. Daniel, Your fiancé called me a pathetic excuse for a father in front of 60 people. And you told me to leave. So I left. And my money left with me." In the background I could hear Emily's voice, high, frantic, almost screeching. "Dad, please," Daniel said quickly. Emily was just stressed. "The planning's been overwhelming." "So overwhelming she teamed up with your mother to publicly humiliate me?" "Don't be naive, son. This wasn't stress. This was staged." "What are you talking about? Mom wasn't even supposed to be there." "Exactly. Yet she arrived at the perfect moment, right on cue, to back Emily's attack. You really don't see the setup?" The line went quiet. I could hear muffled voices on his end, then he came back, his tone colder. "Emily says you're being paranoid. She says this is exactly the controlling behavior that drove Mom away." The words twisted in my chest. After everything I'd done, my son was parroting their lies. "Daniel, who was there for you when your mother left? Who paid your rent when you couldn't find work? Who covered the gap when you wanted to buy Emily that engagement ring? That doesn't give you the right to control our lives." "Control?" I barked a bitter laugh. "I gave you everything you asked for. All I wanted in return was a little respect at my own son's wedding." "You're being dramatic. Emily didn't mean what she said." "Oh, really?" My voice was low, steady. "She called me emotionally unavailable, controlling, and a pathetic excuse for a father." "Which part didn't she mean?" The silence on the other end was deafening. Finally he said, "Look, Dad. Emily loves me. She's just trying to protect our relationship from negative influences." "Negative influences? That's what I am to you now?" "You can be intense," he muttered. Maybe she felt threatened. Threatened? By what? The fact that I paid for her dream wedding? That I welcomed her into this family? "Dad, please. Just reinstate everything. We can sort this out after the wedding." My chest tightened. My son was asking me to fund my own humiliation. "No, Daniel." "What?" "I won't pay for a wedding where I'm treated like a stranger. I won't bankroll a celebration that begins with my public destruction." "Then you're choosing your pride over your son's happiness." "I'm choosing my dignity," I said evenly, "over enabling your fiancé's cruelty." There was a sharp intake of breath. Then he exploded, "Fine. If that's how you want to be, then don't come to the wedding at all. We'll figure out another way." "We don't need you or your money," Daniel shouted. "Daniel, wait." The line went dead. I stared at the phone, the silence pressing in around me like a weight. My own son had made his choice, Emily over me, her lies over my love. But they'd both made one crucial mistake. They thought I'd quietly retreat, fade into the background, and accept exile from the life I built. They thought Ethan Marshall, the man who'd clawed his way up from nothing to build a real estate empire in Chicago, would simply roll over and take it. They were about to discover how wrong they were. I opened my laptop. If Daniel honestly thought he and Emily could replace my funding in 5 days, he was delusional. But before Saturday came, I had work to do. It was time to dig deeper into Emily Carter's background. The next morning, I sat in my office with 3 cups of coffee and a steel resolve. If Emily and Diane thought they could orchestrate my destruction, they had underestimated my resources. 25 years in Chicago real estate had taught me one thing: information is power. I started with my credit card statements, something I should have done months ago. The American Express card I'd given Daniel, for wedding emergencies, told a horrifying story. March 15, Cartier, Michigan Avenue, $12,000. A watch I had never seen Daniel wear. March 22, Nordstrom on Oak Street, $8,000. Designer clothes that weren't his style. April 3, the Peninsula Hotel, $3,000 for a weekend stay. Daniel had told me he was visiting college friends in Milwaukee that weekend. My gut tightened. I called American Express directly. "Mr. Marshall," the rep said, Your account has 2 authorized users. Daniel Marshall added in January and Emily Carter added in March. My grip on the phone turned white. I never authorized Emily Carter. The authorization was completed online using your account credentials on March 10th, she replied. March 10th, 2 days after Emily had helped me organize financial documents for the wedding. She had sat right here in my office, smiled sweetly, and asked to use my computer to show me Pinterest boards. I immediately called my bank. Jennifer, my personal banker, picked up. Ethan, I was just about to call you, she said. There have been several unusual large transactions I needed to verify. A $28,000 wire transfer to Tuscan Dream Vacations last month. Multiple luxury purchases completely out of your usual pattern. The honeymoon I thought I had secretly booked for them in Tuscany? That had actually been Emily's doing, charged to my account without my knowledge. Jennifer, I need every transaction on all my accounts for the past 6 months. Every single one. I'll have them ready within the hour. At the bank, Jennifer handed me a folder thick with evidence. Designer handbags. Jewelry. Spa treatments. Restaurant bills for places I'd never been. A pattern of theft stretching back to February, weeks after Daniel announced their engagement. Jennifer, freeze all the accounts immediately. Change every password. Remove all authorized users except me. Ethan, if this is fraud, we should report it to the authorities, she said softly. Not yet, I replied. I want to handle this my way first. Back home, I spread the bank statements across my dining table like a detective laying out evidence. It was overwhelming. Emily and Diane hadn't just planned my public humiliation, they'd been systematically robbing me. The most damning evidence was a series of transfers to an account registered under Diane's name. 30% of every fraudulent charge had been kicked back to her. They'd turned my generosity into a profit-sharing scheme. I picked up my phone and dialed my attorney, Marcus Chen. Marcus, I said when he answered, I need to see you immediately. And prepare for a very public confrontation. I crossed the street, each step drawing eyes. Guests turned, whispering, recognizing me, the father of the groom, the man who was supposedly too dramatic to be part of his own son's wedding. Michael saw me first. His face went pale. Dad, what are you doing here? I didn't answer him yet. I stopped just short of the crowd, held up the manila folder, and spoke clearly, my voice carrying across the silence. Ladies and gentlemen, I won't take much of your time. But before anyone here commits their support to this marriage, you should know the truth about the bride, and about my ex-wife. Gasps. Shuffling. Phones lifted discreetly. Sarah lunged forward. Don't listen to him. He's bitter, he's controlling, he's... I flipped open the folder. March 15th, Cartier, Michigan Avenue. $12,000 charged to my account. March 22nd, Nordstrom. $8,000. April 3rd, the Peninsula Hotel. $3,000. I held up statements, high enough for the front row to see. Every charge authorized not by my son, but by Sarah Carter. Added to my American Express without permission. Murmurs surged through the crowd. Linda stepped forward, her voice tight. Ethan, stop this. You're embarrassing yourself. I turned a page. Transfers, 30% of each fraudulent charge. Directly into an account under Diane Marshall's name. The air crackled. Guests turned on Linda, whispers becoming sharp accusations. I locked eyes with Michael. Son, they didn't just plan your wedding. They planned to drain me dry. To rob us both. While turning you against me. Michael's lips moved, but no sound came. Sarah grabbed his arm, hissing in his ear. His face contorted between anger, disbelief, and dawning realization. The guests were no longer confused. They were witnesses. And I had just turned the wedding of the season into a courtroom. I held the stack of emails high, letting the papers flutter in the breeze like a judge reading out verdicts. You didn't know, Linda? Then maybe you can explain these. I fanned the printouts in front of me. March 18th, confirmation of transfer, signed off from your personal email. April 10th, you wrote, and I quote, "Make sure to send my share by Friday." The crowd gasped. Even from where I stood I could hear someone mutter, "Oh my God," another voice hissed, I knew something was off. Phones were now everywhere, held high, filming. This wasn't just a scene at a wedding anymore, it was a public reckoning. Sarah's face had gone waxy. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. Michael turned slowly toward her, eyes wide, a hand rising to his forehead like he was trying to press the noise out of his skull. "Sarah, tell me this isn't true." She grabbed his sleeve. "Michael, don't listen to him, he's manipulating you." I took a single step closer, lowering my voice so the calmness cut sharper than any shout. Manipulation is when someone steals from you and convinces you it's love. Evidence is when I show you paper trails, bank transfers, and emails in front of 200 witnesses. I set the manila folder on a cocktail table beside me and flipped open the last sheet, a spreadsheet with every fraudulent charge and Linda's cuts highlighted in yellow. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, turning to the crowd, "I did not cancel this wedding out of spite. I canceled it because it was funded with theft, deceit, and humiliation. And I will not bankroll my own destruction." Linda tried to lunge forward, but two groomsmen instinctively stepped between us. Someone in the back shouted, "Get security." Another voice yelled, "Call the cops." Michael's voice cracked as he turned back to Sarah. Did you really do this?" Sarah's mask slipped. "We needed the money. You don't understand." A collective murmur swept the guests like a wave. No one was on her side now. Not with her screaming, not with my papers spread like a prosecutor's exhibit. I straightened my suit, looking at my son one last time. "Michael, I came here today not to ruin your wedding, but to show you the truth. What you do with that truth is your choice. But my dignity is not for sale." And with that, I closed the folder and stepped back, letting the silence swallow my words. "These aren't just numbers on a page," I said, holding the papers high so the crowd could see. "These are communications between Sarah and Linda. Not only planning the theft, but planning my destruction. Quote, once we destroy his relationship with Michael, we can access the accounts freely." Gasps cut through the gathering like glass shattering. Sarah lunged at me, face twisted, but I stepped back smoothly, lifting the evidence out of her reach. "This conspiracy goes back 6 months, I announced, my voice ringing clear over the chaos. 6 months of systematic theft, while they used my love for Michael as a weapon against me." Michael stood frozen, pale, his lips trembling. "Sarah," his voice cracked. "Is this true? Did you really steal from my father?" Sarah's composure broke. Her eyes darted from me to Michael, desperate, wild. "Michael, you don't understand, he was controlling us. He was using his money to manipulate everything, even our relationship. That's why he paid for the wedding." Michael's reply was barely a whisper. "By giving us everything we asked for?" I turned to the crowd, raising my voice so it cut through Sarah's shrill protests. "Ladies and gentlemen, I canceled this wedding because I refused to bankroll my own destruction. These women plotted to humiliate me, rob me blind, and rip me away from my son. I exposed them today not out of spite, but out of love for Michael." Then softer, looking into my son's stricken face, "Someday, I hope you'll understand. Everything I did was to protect you." The crowd erupted, some in outrage, some filming every second, a few even clapping. Sarah and Linda stood exposed, cornered animals with nowhere left to run. Michael's eyes filled with tears. "Dad? I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I should have believed you." The noise around us dimmed, like we were standing in the eye of a storm. He stepped closer, tears streaming, and whispered, "I let her destroy you in front of everyone. I let her words blind me. I should have defended you. I placed my hand on his shoulder, steady, grounding. For the first time in 5 days, the weight lifted. You were manipulated by experts, son. Sarah planned this for months. Behind us, Sarah was screaming, her voice raw. This is all lies. He's a narcissist. He's twisting everything. But no one was listening. Her shrieks were drowned by 200 witnesses murmuring, filming, shaking their heads at the implosion of a fairy tale. Linda was gone, slipped away during Sarah's meltdown, probably slithering back into whatever hole she came from. Michael wiped his face with the back of his hand, shame heavy in his voice. How did I not see it? All those shopping trips, the weekends away. I thought she was paying. I was blind. Because you loved her, I said simply. And when we love someone, we see what we want to see. Sarah counted on that. Michael shook his head, disgusted. And at the rehearsal dinner, I just stood there. I let her rip you apart in front of everyone. I let her call you a pathetic excuse for a father. You were confused. Manipulated. But when I tried to explain, you believed her over me. And son, that cut deeper than anything she said. Michael's shoulders sagged, his voice breaking. I'll regret that for the rest of my life. You gave me everything, and I betrayed you. The crowd was thinning now, some calling Ubers, some still filming, others whispering the story that would be told across Chicago by sundown. I looked straight into my son's eyes. Michael, understand this. I didn't expose them for revenge. I did it to save you. Another year with Sarah, and she wouldn't just have destroyed us, she would have destroyed your entire future. He nodded grimly, swallowing hard. What happens now? Do we press charges? My lawyer's already handling that, I said, my voice flat, certain. But what matters most, I told him, is that you're safe. That you see clearly now. I can see, Michael said firmly, wiping his eyes. And I never want to see Sarah again. Dad, I know I don't deserve it after what I put you through, but is there any chance we can rebuild what I destroyed? I pulled him into a hug, the first real embrace we had shared in months. Michael, you're my son. You'll always be my son. We'll rebuild. Stronger than before. As we stood there, reunited in the wreckage of what should have been his wedding day, I felt peace wash over me. The truth was out. The conspirators exposed. My relationship with Michael not just restored, but purified by fire. Sarah's voice dwindled into nothing as security led her away. Guests scattered, already rehearsing the story they'd retell across Chicago. Linda had vanished, no doubt plotting her escape. None of that mattered. Michael and I were together again, and that was worth more than any wedding, any money, any revenge. Come on, son, I said, slipping an arm around his shoulders. Let's go home. 6 months later. A crisp October morning in Lincoln Park. The air carried the scent of leaves and possibility. Michael stood adjusting his tie for the second time in a year, but this wedding was nothing like the last. 30 guests surrounded us. No glittering chandeliers, no luxury venue. Just people who genuinely loved him and his bride-to-be. Emma Chen, a pediatric nurse he'd met during his recovery. Dad, Michael said as I pinned his boutonniere, thank you, for saving me from Sarah, for forgiving me, for giving Emma your blessing. I looked at him, the man he had become. No longer the naive boy who had been manipulated. Now someone who could recognize genuine love from calculated deception. Emma appeared at his side, radiant in a simple $300 dress she had insisted on buying herself. Mr. Martinez, she said warmly, I'm grateful you protected Michael. If you hadn't exposed Sarah's lies, he might never have found real happiness. I hugged her. Emma, welcome to our family. And please, call me Dad. The ceremony unfolded in quiet beauty beneath the autumn trees. They exchanged vows they had written themselves. Not a dry eye remained among the witnesses. At the reception, I raised my glass. 6 months ago, I thought I was planning my son's wedding. What I was really doing was preventing his destruction. Today, I'm seeing something far more valuable, my son marrying someone who loves him for exactly who he is. Real love doesn't demand financial proof. Real love doesn't humiliate family. Real love builds, it doesn't tear down. Later, Michael pulled me aside. Dad, the charges were finalized yesterday. Sarah pled guilty to fraud. 18 months. Linda agreed to restitution. Probation. Justice. But it didn't feel as important anymore. What matters, I said, resting a hand on his shoulder, is that you're happy. Safe. That's all I ever wanted. And for the first time in years, I knew my family was whole again. Michael smiled, the same smile he had when he was a little boy. I am, Dad. For the first time in years, I'm genuinely happy. Driving home that night, I thought about everything that had happened. Sometimes protecting the people we love means being cast as the villain in their story, temporarily. Sometimes love requires setting boundaries and refusing to enable destructive behavior. And above all, real family bonds endure anything when they're built on truth, respect, and genuine love. The extravagant fairy tale wedding I had once planned was just fantasy. This simple celebration of authentic love, that was reality. And reality, I realized, was far more beautiful. Sometimes the people we love most will test our faith in ways we never expected. My story isn't just about money, manipulation, or betrayal. It's about the courage to stand for the truth when everything seems lost. As my grandfather always reminded me, God has a way of revealing people's true hearts when we need it most. The Lord works in mysterious ways, and sometimes, He allows us to face betrayal so we can discover the strength we never knew we had.